Okay. Good evening. Welcome to our first edition of Social Distancing. I'm Bathsheba Monk, publisher of Blue Heron Bookworks in Pennsylvania. And joining me from Chicago is poet, essayist, and memoirist Vincent Francone.
Hello.
Hello. Vincent is the poetry reviews editor of another Chicago magazine, professor of writing and sometimes literature at Roosevelt University, and the author of two books, Like a Dog, thank you, which I secretly call Memories of a Former Slacker, and The Soft Lunacy, which is mandatory reading for anyone who's ever loved a book.
Thank you.
So welcome you all to Social Distancing. How's the weather out there, Vince? Let's talk about that first.
It snowed a couple days ago. We got like the first big snow, which I think, probably wouldn't seem like much where you are, I'm guessing, because you guys, I think, tend to get it worse than we do. But it's thick enough where my dog doesn't really love walking on the high piles that have been pushed aside by shoveling.
Your dog is short, right?
He's a 10-pound Chihuahua mix. So yeah, it's tough for the little guy.
Okay. I think you have it worse than us, but that's okay.
Oh.
Yeah, you're on the Great Lakes, so.
True. Yeah, we get a lot of lake effect, and it's not my favorite time of year, and I always wonder why I still live here every time we're at this place.
Well, when you find the perfect place, let us know here. So I'm assuming that we have a lot of writers, a lot of would-be writers that are watching. So I wanted to talk to you, first of all, because I consider you sort of an expert on this, is character.
Ooh.
Because one is character is not something that people who write nonfiction usually consider. And two, because both of your memoirs, the thing that struck me about your writing is that the narrator, you, was such a quirky, interesting character. So my first question is, when you sit down to write, how do you approach the character of you?
Well, it's the problem with memoir is that you are representing yourself. And I think the thing that I never wanted to do was be like the hero per se, like be above all great and the one good person in the book and everybody else is terrible, and use it as like a way of getting revenge against people that, I didn't like in the past. And there's maybe a little bit of that in some of these books. Mm-hmm. But I think I want to say honestly, you have to be as honest as you can about like your failings too. Because I'm writing memoir. The first memoir largely takes place in the past. Like the first two parts of it are the 1990s, and then it kind of catches up to more present day. And I was in my 20s, and I was kind of a like you said, a slacker. That's absolutely correct. And a mooch. One of my friends read it and said, "I never realized you were that much of a mooch." So I didn't want to come off like the romanticized Kerouac bohemian like hero per se, because I always thought that was a little bit of BS. I kind of wanted to be like, I was honestly kind of an asshole for a while, and that's who I wanted to be honest in that. So I think the character hopefully isn't so repellent that people won't want to read it, that there's a charm, as you say, to it, but it's largely about just being very honest after the first draft and going, I'm making myself look a little too good here, and everybody else look like the villain. Like I need to be more, not the villain, but just more like represent how I feel I was, if that makes any sense. But
that's really, that's so unusual in first time attempts at writing a whole book, because usually writers try to make themselves look cooler than they are. That was certainly my fault when I first started writing, was I wanted to make my dorkiness better on the page. But you didn't do that. And I'm reminded of, I took a stand-up comedy course a number of years ago, and the instructor, Brad Trackman, said that the way you appeal is that you have to have the audience look down on you just a little. So you did that admirably.
I mean, it definitely helps, I think, because I don't know that, I just think from reading a lot of fiction and nonfiction that I recognize that I don't need to necessarily like love every moment of every character's representation on the page. Like everything they do doesn't have to be like forgivable and great. It just has to feel honest. And I try, as weird as it is, I try to make it honest. Also recognizing that like every day we create a character of ourselves by just trying to represent like the best parts of ourselves in public, and it's not 100% true all the time. So I think it's not as hard when you think of it that way to create a character who is really you, who's a true character. It's not fiction, but yet it's still like a certain filtered version of you, I suppose.
Yeah.
I tried to be a little bit more revealing than I think I'm comfortable with now. In retrospect, I can't believe I wrote some of the stuff that's in these two books, but it's fairly, there's some warts for sure on that. On that.
But I think that people want to see your warts because they have them, and I think people are kind of relieved when a writer exposes themselves, really, like you did.
I guess so. Yeah. Would you really want to read a character, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, who is just like holier than thou and perfect and unassailable? Like, what's the whole, like, not unassailable, but unimpeachable? Like, what's the point, I guess, of that?
Yeah. Right. No, you're right. I like the technique that you used, and I don't know if this was a conscious technique or not, but this is what sold me on you. Actually, was you go through. This was on the first book, Like a Dog. You can hold that up again if you would.
Sure.
This is a fabulous book about work. Anybody who's ever worked would love to read this book. Okay, so when you were describing all these people in the book. And they were characters, and you did it with a real deadpan, straight ahead look, and they would say these things, and you would just let the absurdity of life kind of speak for itself. And then they would say something, and at the end of their little speech, you would just say, "Okay." I thought, was that conscious, or is that really the way you are in real life?
A little of both. I think there's a lot of situations where I don't much have an answer to what people say. I think it's me. This is a statement about me more than people I've known, but I tend to attract oddballs. Like, I just feel like the oddest people, like I'm riding the subway and just the craziest people will feel very comfortable just sitting next to me, talking to me without any invitation at all. I don't know what it is. I think it's just, that's how it is. And most of my friends, I think, especially in that period when I was writing about, like when I was sorting mail and just out of high school, like were a little bit strange and eccentric. And at the bookstore for sure too. It's just, it seems to be either I gravitate to them or they gravitate to me. And so it's really interesting to just let them, sometimes they really just bulldoze and you have nothing to say once they've like talked for a while, except, okay, what? Like, I think it's that quality that keeps them from sort of like running away. It's like most of the people I know who've stuck with me or vice versa. It's a lack of judgment that I try to give and that's just all you can do sometimes is say that. But I do tend to be a little bit like sarcastic and deadpan. I've heard a lot, caustic occasionally, but somehow there's just nothing better to say to these people when they kind of rant about whatever. Then all right,
okay, just do it. Right. I think by and large that writers tend, because I think most writers are voyeurs to a certain extent, and so you do attract colorful characters into your orbit, sort of. So that was your first book. In your second book, and you can hold this one up now, A Soft Lunacy, beautiful book. It's for bibliophiles and for readers alike. Tell us about that book a little bit.
That book is Like a Dog. Well, if I can kind of backtrack, was definitely, I don't want to say an easier book to write, but because so much of it was, I was writing it in 2008. I started writing it, I want to say, and I was going back to 1992. So there's so many things where it's like, well, I know what's going to happen next, and what's going to happen next. But Soft Lunacy, I wrote it in 2016, and I was writing it largely like every day, like as a journal, a long, like messy manuscript of a journal. And so by the time it came out, it had gone through a lot of like edits and a lot of paring down, and a lot of it was like, I don't know if this is really a book. And I would sort of send it, I remember sending it to you going, I don't know where, like, if it's really a book. And you kind of be like, well, I think it needs some direction. And, there's a little bit of back and forth that got it where it is, but it was way, I never would have, I don't think I can even do something like that again, where it's just like almost like people live tweet things, just recording everything as it's happening. And then just sort of finding the bits that work and figuring out like, how do I make some kind of not quite streamlined, because it's not really like a sustained narrative. It's pretty episodic, but at the same time, some kind of like through line through the entire thing. And it was really tricky, but I'm glad that I think I pulled it off at least.
You certainly did pull it off. I know that there's some people who are writing memoirs. I invited them to watch, and one of the questions that memoirists who are just starting to write, they always think they have to start at, like, in utero.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, how did you get past that into this theme of telling your life through the books that you owned?
Well, I think memoirs that I started to recognize as a reader years ago, the difference between memoir and autobiography, or even biography. So a biography, whether it's autobiography or not, is supposed to represent an entire life. And memoirists, especially at my age, and I'm not like in my 20s anymore, but I'm, pushing 50 at this point. It's just like I'm not at a point where I feel like I have a life that's long enough that I can write about it as like a long saga. So you pick an episode in your life, or you pick a year, or you pick like parameters. So that was how I grounded Like a Dog. Was I'm going to choose these years and these particular moments of my life that all have to do with 3 different jobs that I've had in 3 different like work experiences. And Soft Lunacy was a little easier because it's like, well, I'm just going to focus on the year 2016. And the big through line for that, or the connective tissue, is just writing about books and writing about why I've collected all these books and what every book means to me. And it was a little bit of a ripoff of a book by a Russian writer named Sergei Dovlatov called The Suitcase, where he fled the Soviet Union, and he like stuffed a bunch of random things into a suitcase and brought it. And like years later, his wife was like, when are you going to clean out that suitcase? And he was unpacking it, trying to remember, like, why did I pick each item? And each item had like a story.
A story.
So the same thing was like, well, why do I keep these books? Like, why do I need, to have 23 copies of The Master and Margarita, which I do. It's just like, because clearly this book is important to me, so maybe it deserves a chapter. And so it was more like thinking about the books that have a story connected to them that I thought would be celebrating book collecting, and a shout out to bibliophiles, but also like a unique tale that I could throw on it, rather than just like straight literary criticism, which at times I attempt to do a little bit of that in the book, but I don't always I'm not a literary critic or a good enough literary critic to be able to pull that off without a little bit of like anecdote.
I especially liked the way each of the stories had a story about your life in it, each book. And when you think about it, everything that you own does have a story. And really, if it doesn't have a story, what do I'm not Kwando or whoever that woman is.
Maria Kondo.
Yeah, I'm not married. That's right. I'm not her, but it's like, if it doesn't mean something to you, just why do you have it? And I like to be surrounded with stories in my books and my CDs and so.
No, there's something about like that was very popular when I was writing the book. I think it's Marie Kondo, or the woman. She had the Netflix show about like does the joy. So there was a little bit of that behind it too, because I kept thinking, like, there's like I got rid of a lot of the books at the beginning of the year, and that's what I started writing it about. It's like, well, I'm going to pare this library down from around like 6,000 books to I think I sold 2,000 books in January of 2016, and then I have pretty much replaced most of those by now. Like I've amassed a ton more, even though I just recently lost 200 to a flood in my apartment, which is very tragic. But like when I was looking at the ones like why like I'm going to keep this one and get rid of this one, and why am I keeping it? Why am I getting rid of this? And it must have some symbolism or something important. And some of them, it's like you flip through it and you find like, oh, like a receipt from, where you bought it, or you see like a postcard from when you bought it on vacation, or like, oh, I took this book to Europe with me and it's got like a, postmark from Paris, and it's like all these really cool things. There's a story behind all of them, which is what I like. I may not look at some of the books I own for 10 years, and then when I open it up, it's like immediately I remember, oh yeah, this is what I was doing at that time. I think that's universal. I think anyone who collects anything probably has the same experience.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe, I don't know.
And here, so far you have succeeded in not telling us any stories about yourself, like a typical writer. So we're going to get it out of you for people who want to know more about you.
Shoot, I'm an open book, if you'll pardon the pun. So.
But you have to buy it first. Right?
Yeah.
So there's this thing called a Proust questionnaire, and I'm sure you've heard of it. Most writers have heard of it. It wasn't designed by Marcel Proust. It was written by his girlfriend. I'm not sure if she wanted to know about him, or if she she was trying to help him with his writing. But it's a series of questions trying to get to know somebody. So I thought We'll take a couple minutes, if you don't mind, just to ask you some of these, and you can pass if you don't want to answer the question. Okay,
Yeah,
but they're
sure.
meant to be they're meant to be probing and personal. Okay,
All
so the
right.
first, all right, good. So, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
Reading, obviously. So probably sitting on the couch. I'm a lazy guy. Sitting on the couch with the dog, reading a book, and probably some kind of beverage nearby, either tea if it's daytime, or whiskey or something stronger if it's nights. But I like it. I'm getting at the point where I probably would have said travel at one point, and it still is very important to me. But I'm getting the COVID thing is terrible. But if there's one thing about this whole situation that does kind of cater to my lifestyle, is that I was already becoming a bit of a homebody at that point anyway. But sitting on the couch with the dog and the book.
So this cemented it. COVID cemented your hermit tendencies.
I'm reading a lot more. I mean,
yeah.
I don't have to commute and I don't have to go to work, so I work from home, and so yeah, it's easier to get through the books. So more couch time lately, but
okay. So this goes into the next question. What is your greatest fear?
Oof. That one is harder because there's like legitimate fears that are more, like things that I'm scared of, like, vermin and things like that creep me out. But like deep fear, I don't know. It's always failure. It's just always looming over me, however I define that, which probably is different than other people define it, but just failure. I mean, it doesn't stop me from doing things that are completely make me very vulnerable, like trying to get books published. But at the same time, that's probably the biggie.
Yeah. I'm curious what most women would say, if that's a male thing mostly. If it's
You're probably right. It probably is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that later. So, what is the trait that you most deplore in yourself?
Probably the need for validation, and then the like shame whenever I get validation. So it's like this thing where you crave something, and then when you get it, you feel guilty, and like you just run from it. So
you Catholic?
It's very Catholic. I'm Italian. I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic high school, and it's very much a Italian Catholic thing, probably a Catholic thing in general. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
As soon as you get it, you can't enjoy it.
Right. So what trait do you most deplore in others?
Oh, that's easy. Incuriosity. It's the big thing that everyone said about Trump, which I've been saying for a while, is like, he's just not curious about the existence of anything outside of his own sphere, other cultures, other ways of thinking. And it's like, it revealed to me, like, that's why I was such a critic of the guy. And that's what I don't like about people in general, is the rigidness of their experience and the inability or the lack of curiosity about anyone else's.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Not that I have to, but
you can agree or disagree. It's fine.
What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
Yeah. Okay. Tricky. I'm thinking of like the biblical virtues, probably like I think temperance is one of them, which I'm probably misdefining in my head, because when I hear temperance, I think of the temperance movement, and obviously I'm not like,
Temperate.
obeying that. So I mean, it's not like it's not important, but if overrated, I probably would say that. If that's one of the virtues that I remember from my Catholic training.
Yeah. So do you lie, and on what occasion do you lie?
In my writing, I mean, as honest as I tried to make it, there's still, I'm trying not to, we said earlier, like, I'm trying not to misrepresent my character to be heroic, but at the same time, like, I didn't misrepresent anything too big, but you conflate a little bit of, like, two characters are easy to pull into one and things like that. So probably then is probably the biggest time that I lie. Otherwise, I probably lie in little ways all the time that I'm not even cognizant of, but like the big lies are when I'm writing. And I'm trying to write fiction now. I'm like doing that lately this year. And, that's all one big lie of making up things, and, representing truth through fiction is kind of a big lie.
We have to talk.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you that one because I know what the answer is.
Oh, well, really? I'm curious what the question is, what the answer is. So you ask it and you answer it for me.
No, I won't.
Okay.
I'll ask you the question, but you don't have to. But don't answer it. Okay.
Okay.
Which living person do you most despise?
Oh, Well, there's a lot.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, you're probably thinking, Trump, because that's what I said earlier, but I would expand that to like anyone with any leader with authoritarian tendencies. So that's most men in power, really. That's Duterte, that's Putin, that's it's not just men. It's what's her name from Myanmar. She's definitely on the list as well.
Yeah.
Really, anyone who abuses power in that way for their own like obvious self-serving corruption. I'd say that's probably So
Okay.
I'll not just pick on that one guy from our country. I'll expand it beyond that.
I know you wouldn't do that. Okay. What quality do you like most in a man?
Modesty.
Ah. What quality do you like most in a woman?
Intelligence.
Ah.
As like kiss-assy as that sounds, that's true.
It does a little, yeah.
Well, I haven't. It's not like I have a large history of romantic relationships, but like of the ones that I have, which I write a lot about in the Soft Lunacy, it's like the sub theme is like my failed relationships in my marriage. But like I realized at a certain point that I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world, but I want somebody who's like as smart or smarter than me to talk to. Otherwise, it just sounds like it would be boring and frustrating. So
yeah.
And I like I don't know. I like I like smart people.
Good. Okay, I just have one more of these. Who are your heroes in real life?
In real life?
Mm-hmm.
Three-way tie: my wife, my mom, and Allie Smith. Those are the big three right now. If I could pick, me, my wife, because she's my hero, because she's a better person than I am, and she does things that I could never possibly do. And my mother, because she's endured a lot, especially lately. And I kind of look back at everything she went through and think, how did she do that? With kids, Jesus. And then literary, right now I'm reading a lot of books by Allie Smith, so I would probably say she's a living hero at the moment.
Okay. So you get like crushes on literary hero. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I get like big, like I write in the Soft Lunacy about Jeanette Winterson and like stalking her and like lying about my credentials to get an interview with her when she was in Chicago. Like if the writer, which was great, and I would happily do it again, but like she's still high on the list. But if like I've read 8 books by Allie Smith since last year, because it's just like I'm on a kick with one person. I just want to like read everything they've written because it's that good. So there's my shout out to her.
So what are you writing now? What are you working on?
I'm working on the COVID book. I spent most of last year working on a manuscript that was more of a really like absurdist fiction book about high school that was really dark and full of violence. It's an exaggerated story about my high school experience. But I was rereading it because I kept thinking over winter break, like I get to reread this and do the edits, and I'm almost considering trashing the entire thing because it needs so much work. But instead of being a good writer and working on the manuscript that's sort of the first draft is done, I'm actually writing a second one because I don't want to go back and work on the first. So I'm writing a kind of my COVID apocalyptic book right now that I'm hoping to be finished with the first draft by summer. And then I want to take like my summer break from school to really evaluate both like kind of embryonic manuscripts and figure out which is the one I need to like put my chips on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't edit as you go along? You just write, you like first draft, stream of consciousness sort of thing?
I will usually, I don't look back I try not to look back until I have a bulk of it done, at least like a good, like say 100 to 200 pages before I start to look backward. Because what ends up happening is I only will see the flaws and I'll get so discouraged that I'll just bury it. So it's like if I don't finish something, at least where it's sort of first draft done and probably in need of a lot of work, then I won't ever finish it. Because at least I'll have it finished and I can sort of go back and fix all the mistakes knowing that like there's an end that's completed at least. Whereas like if I wrote like 20 pages and then reread them, I would be like, this is terrible. And all the anxiety would pop up and I would just trash it. So it's just, I've learned the hard way because of abandoning many, many, many projects. Like that the only way to finish it is to just make a big mess and then clean it up when it's finished.
Yeah. Do you like writing better or editing what you've written?
writing feels better because it's just this, oh my God, I wrote like, 1,200 words today, which is just amazing. I can't believe I did
Yes.
that. And you get this rush and you get like the honeymoon phase, we used to call it when I was a poetry writer, more predominantly around write poems. And you'd write a poem and then you would just feel so in love with the fact that you did it that you'd want to submit it immediately because you still like are in love with it. It's the honeymoon phase. So the editing and the revising is the hard part where you have to be more responsible. So I don't know that I like that as much, but I do find a lot of satisfaction now from the revision that I never used to. Like when I revise and I feel like I've been responsible and cut something that really should be cut, it's just it makes me feel more grown up and more, a little less like a kid who's just playing and more like a responsible writer who's like making the hard decision to chop a line off, because it's not working.
So what did you find like are the differences between, I mean, you said before you thought that fiction was a lie. I would totally disagree with that. But I mean, you may change the names to protect the innocent, but I kind of think it's all true. But what do you find, what's the difference between like writing your first two books and the novels that you're working on now?
I think what I figured out, and you're right, I'm probably wrong with that statement. It feels like because I'm so used to writing poetry, which was always from my perspective, and then writing memoirs and essays and book reviews for years, which is all just me and my perspective. Like it feels like now that I'm making it up, it's just like, it's all just, not true. But I realize like I'm drawing on truth. I'm drawing on people I know. I'm kind of like satirizing people I know in this. But the big thing I will say that I never tried before, and this is going to sound so like rudimentary and elementary, maybe is the better word. I'm writing this new thing in the third person, and I've never done that. And it's just so much more fun and liberating. Because I just think the reason why I think I did the memoirs instead of writing fiction out of the gate was that I could never really figure out what the first person voice should be. And so I finally just said, the first person voice will be my voice. It'll just be me, the way that I would tell a story. If I was like sitting like, at a bar and having a drink and telling a story with somebody. And now that I'm sort of trying to do fiction, I think it's better served by me being a little bit of the voice still. And narrating events, whereas I try to inhibit characters. And like I'm writing a lot of women characters, and I'm not going to try to be a first person narrator with their voices. As I don't think I can pull it off as well. I think it's a thing that men have been grappling with and should be honest about for years, which is that we suck at writing women characters often. Like if you ever read Hemingway, you know what I'm talking about. It's like,
yes,
terrible female characters. Yeah. So it's just, rather than sort of try to put myself in that mindset, I'm just trying to do a more omniscient overview. And I think it's really exciting and kind of liberating in a way, because the memoir is about keeping a consistent voice that's me. And fiction, if you're jumping around the heads of people, I think it's really easy to just like have a book that feels like it was told by 3 different people as opposed to one person. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I answered that or not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's changing the person when you're writing is sometimes when I'm stuck, I do that. It's like, oh, I can't do this in third person. I got to tell us from this point of view, or change points of view. Use a couple. So I'm a big believer in doing that. Actually, is especially if somebody's not working, to throw it up in the air and say, let's change the point of view. Let's put it on Mars, maybe, and try some different things, to make it go.
Do you think, out of curiosity, do you think third person is less popular? Like more writers just default to first person these days?
I think everybody's writing in the first person. And personally, I find it really, I think it would be tough to sustain something that interesting. I put most of them down eventually. I mean, just for me, just because there's only so much you can observe, first person, and I like the overview of writing better. Yeah. So,
I think that's true. Yeah, you see so many novels that are first person. I think it's a criticism that someone I know leveled at like the modern novel is that it's all the first person kind of solipsistic and not like the great Victorian novel that's like a sweeping epic of third person narration, creating an entire like polyphonic symphony of characters and all that. And I get that, but So it's interesting because I just naturally decided to write first person for years, and then I'm trying this for the first time, and it seems oddly way more liberating than I imagined
Yeah.
it would be. Like I thought it would be somehow harder or more confining, but it's not.
It's not, no. And I guess it depends too, on what interests you. You know,
Hmm.
if like you, if the character, if you're interested in a character's relationship with their environment, then that's one thing, and how they all interrelate, all the people. But if, you know, some people, they're geniuses at describing their own world and how they feel in it, you know. I'm not one of those, but
I
I,
don't know that I would be either, but I do recognize some of the better like first person novels that are very which just less like again I keep defaulting to Hemingway. We're gonna pick on Hemingway a little bit, but like not all of his books are first person, but it does feel like it's the same voice in every story, and it's very much him, and it's very much limited. And I know that was the style, but sometimes that's really engaging, and I think it's beautiful and impressive, and the like brevity and the sparse quality. But sometimes it's like I could read this once every 5 years. I don't know if I want to read like 3 Hemingway books in a row. I'd probably want to go nuts.
yeah, wow. I wouldn't ask anybody to do that ever. Although I do like Hemingway, I do. But okay, so if somebody wants to find out more about you, you have a blog, don't you?
I do. I have a website with a blog
Mm-hmm.
on it. It's very simple. It's www.vincentfrancone, one word.com, which I think I can put up here on the screen real fast, assuming I can type. And yep, right
There it
there.
is.
So it's my website. You can buy my books, see any updates of whatever is going on with me, which, you know, for instance, I would update by posting a link to this. And I have a blog on there, which is just me ranting about whatever happens to come into my head at that moment. It's sometimes book related. It's sometimes just whatever. Lots of pictures of me and my dogs, and you know, my podcast I used to have that's kind of in limbo right now is up there as well.
Okay. Okay, well, I want to thank you for being our first guest on social
Yay!
distancing, and we're going to do it again in a couple weeks, right? Or
Yeah, we're planning on doing a real festive event around the holiday, right?
around Valentine's Day, we're going to have 3 Blue Heron Bookworks authors read us some romantic love stories that they've written and are working on or whatever, and we'll have more on that. We'll post it and tell you all when to tune in to that. So,
Is that going to be a real steamy event? Should we keep this like PG-13, or what do you think?
I think we should keep the kids, you know, out of the room. Give them a drink, make them go away.
Sure. Here, have some Robitussin and go to sleep early because the adults are going to be, talking. No.
Right. And I think we should do it before Valentine's Day, like a day before, so that the men that are listening are reminded that something is expected, okay, out of them. So.
Yeah, well, we do need that reminding. So not to delay this because I know we're wrapping up, but that first question I answered about like fear of failure or something, just as a last comment, because I do want to get your take while I'm thinking of it. Like, do you think that's more of a masculine thing? Like if a woman was to answer that, if you were to answer that question, what biggest fear, what do you think it might be?
Well, mine is actually fear of failure too. So maybe it's not strictly masculine, but I would just assume that more men would be driven by that. But
okay, no,
okay.
I think there's a point there to be digested.
Yeah,
I'm going to think on that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we'll see everybody in a couple weeks, and thank you, Vincent, again. And good night.
Take care.